I think the issue is very complex. I think let's face it, that whole area is a powder keg. We have Iran, who would love to move in on a crippled Afghanistan, sure. And you have also Russia. This is why the problem is immense, and at this point in time, everybody's jumping in, but when it gets hot, I don't count on the Russians for support. I wouldn't count on the Pakistani government for support as well.
Yeah, you wonder, based on history, that you know, when the bullets start flying, who's going to be standing there alongside us to be counted?
Not only, Jack. More importantly, Peshawar, Pakistan, is really the thoroughfare of the terrorists, ferrying back and forth between. That's where we picked up. That's where we picked up Ramzi Youssef in a safe house that Osama bin Laden has supported all these years.
Jerry in New Jersey, you have a question? Oh, Kelly, I'm sorry. Excuse me. That's what I said. Jerry in New Jersey.
No, it's Joey.
It's Joey. I apologize.
That's no problem.
It's very late and I'm tired.
To the families of that horrific act in the World Trade Center. But I have a question. My sister and my brother-in-law tonight came up with something. Why on airplanes can't they just have a gas to release that they can put the passengers to sleep or for an hour if in fact there's a hijacking where the pilots could go land safely somewhere?
Mary Schiavo will probably know the answer to that. Sounds like a good idea to me. I don't know I'm not a sophisticated aviation expert, but what about that? Some sort of disabling agent?
Well, that is one that I hadn't heard considered in the FAA during my tenure at the Department of Transportation, but it would work for this reason. The only people on the aircraft that have smoke hoods, that have protective breathing equipment, or PBEs, are the pilots and the flight attendants, other than passengers like myself who happen to carry their own. But literally those would be the only people that would be protected from the gas, because passengers don't have them, and those little oxygen masks that fall from the ceiling wouldn't do a thing. So theoretically it would work, but you'd have to make sure you know, the pilots and flight attendants got the PBEs on and not the hijackers. So I've never heard that one. I've heard lots of stuff, even gases for fire extinguishing, but not that one.
I'm just sitting here thinking, I wonder too what kind of potential liability you might encounter if you found somebody on the plane who has had a sensitivity to whatever the agent was. I mean, you could get into a whole long discussion, I suppose, but it's not a bad idea.
Well, you actually did have that problem on one foreign flight where they had a very unruly passenger, and they did inject him with something to calm him down, and that passenger died. So you probably would have liability like that, but the caller said to put them to sleep. Lots of people are sensitive to it, but that is one that I can honestly say I hadn't heard discussed in the Department of Transportation.
Interesting. Adam in Kansas, what's your question?
Yeah, hey, I was wondering, with the talk of a ground war in Afghanistan that we've heard the rumors of, is the administration worried this could turn into another Vietnam with as mountainous as terrain that the terrain is?
You know, the Russians spent 20 years in there and finally had to give up and go away. I mean, they couldn't get it done. I mean, this is arguably the toughest terrain in the world to try to fight a ground war in. What about that?
Yeah, British also as well. No, and we built the structures for the Osama to withstand Soviet carpet bombing for years.
Yeah, with the Western money financed the effort against the Russians.
Gave them Stinger missiles, which we're trying to purchase back now. No, I don't think we want to get involved in a protracted war because the country still has memory of Vietnam. And, you know, again, America has a blessing in that philosophically we forget very easily, and sometimes ignorance is bliss. And, but in this case, I think we're in for a long, protracted war, but certainly not on the ground in Afghanistan. That would be as bad as getting into a land war down in South America with the drug trade.
Yeah, Major Garrett in Washington, one of the great fears when the current president's father, George Herbert Walker Bush, committed to going in against Saddam Hussein was that the American appetite for prosecuting a ground war would pale very quickly when the body bags began coming out. For want of a better way to phrase it, that ground war in Iraq would be a walk in the park compared to the kind of thing potentially that ground troops would get into in Afghanistan. What about that potential for simply destroying in a very short period of time, perhaps, the American will to do this thing?
Well, I think we want to be careful and not get too far ahead of ourselves. You know, there is a sense, people look at the map strategically, they talk, well, would it require ground troops? All the administration has said so far is it's not ruling out ground troops. It has never given a wink or a nod that we should prepare for ground troops. What the president has said is, I'm ruling nothing out. We should prepare for every eventuality. But we had a caller earlier asking about, are we going to try to find ways to domestically produce more textiles, more steel, more other goods associated with a 20th century type of war. And again, the president is trying to prepare all of us to understand that those kinds of thoughts, Rosie the Riveter and a massive industrial buildup, is probably not what we're going to be encountering here, because the enemy is shadowy, elusive in many different places. And he's also saying, you know, don't think about this in a traditional military sense, and that would, I would suggest to you, perhaps argue against active contemplation of a ground war in a place distant as Afghanistan, though it's worth pointing out the administration has ruled nothing out, but I don't think it is laying the kind of groundwork yet for that. And of course, in your reference to the point about Iraq, it was very much on the minds of the President, George Herbert Walker Bush, to stay within the confines of the UN resolution and not pursue that ground war through Baghdad. There's been innumerable second guessing about that.
Yeah,
and one of the factors, of course, was, can the United States sustain the kind of casualties, politically and otherwise?
You know, there's a lot of second guessing. In hindsight, being 2020, a lot of people wondering why we didn't do more than what we did, I think, in Iraq. Tom on the phone in Connecticut, what's your question? Oh, I'm sorry, Arlene in California. What can we do for you?
Yes, hello. It's a well-known fact that people all over the world get their information from CNN. Knowing this, why do you give the specifics on passenger profiling that could be of great interest to future terrorists? And shouldn't you, as responsible journalists, exercise discretion when it comes to divulging articulate information or critical information?
That's a legitimate question. Let me just, and he doesn't need me to defend him, but let me, in context, just suggest that that comment came up in an effort to understand why our security people and the agencies charged with preventing the kind of tragedy that happened last Tuesday were unable to pick this up. And the man sitting to my left, Harvey Kushner, has been studying this stuff all his life, and I think he was trying to shed a little light on the fact that there were some signs, if we'd really been paying attention, that perhaps there were some signs. Harvey, you can...
And Jack, I wasn't giving up the profiling system, which I'm not privy to the inner workings of, but the question I asked Mary was one of the most basic things, a one-way ticket by cash.
Right.
You know, this begs the question, Jack. I just want to move back for a second. We've been looking at really the nuts and bolts of, you know, reactive measures. I'd like to ratchet up our efforts in human intelligence. You know, we're calling this Operation Noble Eagle. We should have Operation Noble Effort and make it a noble profession once again to join the CIA, join the NSA, FBI. In other words, I want to be able to get people inside these organizations that would do us harm. So they're going to make that call prior to somebody boarding the plane. So it makes our people at the airports look good that they stopped them as they got on the plane.
Is it a legitimate criticism that we've come to rely too heavily on technical intelligence and the ability of gizmos and things?
Absolutely.
And, you know, you talk to New York City detectives, they'll tell you want to catch the bad guy, you've got to put money in the street, and you've got to be willing to associate with the bad guys. And there's no substitute for that.
Absolutely. You look at domestic crime, and I think it's the same in fighting terrorism. It's the tipster, the person, the informant, that gets the case done.
I had promised I wanted to ask you this, and we're coming up on the end of this thing. What is it that has engendered so much hatred toward the United States in that part of the world, and what, if anything, can be done about it besides going to war over there?
Jack, it's a multifaceted problem. Certainly, we could begin by the support of certain countries in that region. America's steadfast support of the State of Israel obviously is a thorn in the side of some Arab communities. America's involvement in what's perceived as the Holy Land defiling, you know, being in Saudi Arabia. What's an irritant, particularly to Osama bin Laden, is the fact that the infidels, the United States in particular, got involved in a Muslim issue, which was an invasion of Iraq, of Kuwait, which they viewed that the Kuwait was drawn by the West itself. So it's not just one particular thing, it's a whole group of things, and interestingly enough, many different groups there focus in what the irritant is, and they all come together as one thing, their hatred for the United States. It's that pot that brews continuously. It's not just the Israeli issue, it's not just being in Saudi Arabia, it's not just our involvement in the Persian Gulf War, it's the fact that within this interpretation of Islam, that technology and the West and the Western way of life is blasphemy, is an apostasy to these people. It's a whole very complicated groups of issues, and it's not just one thing.
Is it too late to get involved in some sort of proactive foreign policy in that part of the world? We are dependent on oil, perhaps because, again, of our complacency about energy problems in this country. We consume a tremendous amount of it, and a lot of it has to come from the Middle East. We are strong supporters of the Israelis in a political alliance that goes back over 50 years now. But is there something in the way of a foreign policy initiative that could be started that might begin to at least blunt the intensity, the white-hot heat of the hatred over there?
Well, we need to support, we said before when Jeff was here earlier, that the misery, the poverty in that region precipitates this type of behavior. So obviously a foreign policy that addresses that particular issue. But we also have to understand the world is a bad neighborhood, and there's some bad people out there who want to do us harm, and we can't fight with, is it the Marcus of Queensberry rules of fair fight, roll up the sleeves or do
the gentleman's agreement.
We might have to roll back President Ford's directive not to assassinate people. I don't want to get into a policy of assassination, but I think everybody out there understands what I mean. We need covert operations sometimes to take somebody out when that's the particular issue. And we got to get that human intelligence in the ground, so we put people in the right positions in government, and not necessarily despots, maybe good people. And understand that that region of the world doesn't get democracy overnight.
All right, Harvey, author of Future of Terrorism, Harvey Kushner, thank you very much for being with us tonight. It's been most interesting. I've enjoyed it.
Well, good looking your show.
And Mary Schiavo, thank you, former Department of Transportation Inspector General, author of the bestseller Flying Blind, Flying Safe. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll do this again. And mostly, thank you people for watching. This is the maiden voyage of CNN Hotline. We leave you tonight with some remarkable images of New York's firefighters. Some of the real heroes of all of this, is captured by the photographers of the Associated Press and put together by a friend and colleague of mine, Peter Viles. We caution you, some of these images are graphic, disturbing, but they are moving and very germane to what's going on. Thanks again. I'm Jack Cafferty. I think we'll see you again tomorrow night.
Chaplain Michael Judge, the New York City Fire Department chaplain, who was administering last rites to one of his own, another firefighter, when debris fell on him.
Almost every morning he would say a special prayer for peace in the city and for safety for all the visitors, because he just thought this was the greatest place in the world.
He would say to me once in a while, you know what I really need? No, what, Mike? Absolutely nothing. I don't need a thing in the world. I am the happiest man on the face of the earth.
It was terror, sheer terror. Bodies were falling out of the sky.
Do you ever think of maybe not being a fireman anymore?
No, Mr. King, I will always be a fireman here in New York City.
In terms of the people we're looking for, it's a couple of hundred firefighters and police officers, which is a staggering number. The men and women who are doing this, when you see them doing it, they are literally putting their lives at risk to try to find people and save them.
Personally, I've lost quite a few, maybe a dozen personal friends, and it breaks my heart. They're great men, they're very great men.
Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for making the nation proud. And may God bless America.
This recovery operation is an exceedingly dangerous operation, and the men and women who are involved in it are very brave people and entitled to the admiration and respect of all of us.
Do you ever think of maybe not being a fireman anymore?
No, Mr. King, I will always be a fireman here in New York City, protecting the people of New York and my friends.